Today I'm going to be making food from the Demon Slayer's Swordsmith Village arc all day, but here's the thing. It's not for me. I was able to recently explore a place called Steelport Knives where they make really custom American-made chef knives. The head knife maker and one of the owners wasn't there, so I very casually and nonchalantly picked up one of their very beautiful knives. I'm gonna be using this knife to make them a full Demon Slayer style meal and bring it back to them and hopefully get a full tour of how they do everything. Now with this beautiful knife in hand and making these really amazing cuts, I'm actually gonna be making something from the first episode of Demon Slayer's Swordsmith Village arc. I did get to see this in theaters, so I have a little bit of a leg up. The first dish is actually a mushroom onigiri. Now they made matsutake rice in the show, but since I don't have access to matsutake mushrooms, I'm using oysters and shiitakes. Now these green onions are actually going to be for the second onigiri that I'm making, and this one is going to be a tuna mayo. No, it's not traditional, but it is the most popular version out in Japan right now. And this is super simple to make. It's 20 ounces of canned tuna, followed by 1/2 cup of Kewpie mayo, and quite a few tablespoons worth of the chili crisp. A little bit of salt and some green onions for flavor. Mix this all up as best as you can and make sure you do give this a taste to see if you want any more seasoning in it before you start finishing it. Mine was ready to go. I grabbed a spoon for the road and now I'm ready to cook off my mushrooms. The mushrooms are going to need 2 big tablespoons of butter followed by 2 to 3 chopped cloves of garlic. We're going to toast this up in the butter so it's nice and aromatic, and then I'm throwing in all of that chopped mushroom that I had done previously. Now best practice is to really cook this mushroom down until almost all of that liquid is gone. Make sure you do season this with a hefty amount of salt and black pepper because mushrooms can take on a lot of salt. Give this a taste, and once that's ready, cool it down. The next thing I'm making is a Castile cake. This cake needs 6 whole eggs followed by 1/2 cup of sugar and 1/2 cup worth of corn syrup. I'm mixing this at a low speed until everything is incorporated, scraping this down to make sure nothing is up on the sides, and then throwing in a whisk, and then we're going to whisk this at a very high speed until it's doubled in volume. You can see how nice and creamy and smooth this is now. Once it's that consistency, I'm adding in around 2 cups worth of bread flour. You can also use all-purpose flour, and I think that might actually give you a better texture than bread flour, but bread flour is pretty traditional. After mixing this with the flour for 1 minute, I'm putting this in an aluminum lined pan, but it would have been better with parchment paper. I just didn't have any. Once I have all of my batter in my aluminum lined pan, I'm baking this in the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit until it is nice and cooked. This didn't get the same color that I wanted on there, so I'm just going to torch the top of it and nobody has to know. Torching it actually does caramelize the top of this really well, and maybe I'll do this in the future too. Making sure I poke the cake with quite a few holes with a fork, and then I'm brushing this with a mixture of 2 tablespoons worth of honey and 1 tablespoon worth of water. I'm using up all this mixture and then I'm letting the cake sit overnight to soak. Now this is actually the next day. I'm taking some rice that I had previously cooked in the rice steamer behind me at 6 a.m. and I'm folding it with all of those mushrooms that we had cooked previously. This does get kind of hard to work with because the mushrooms have quite a bit of butter in it, but you just have to have some patience and you're able to make these really beautiful mushroom style onigiri. Realistically, the mushrooms remind me of a mushroom duxelle that you would see in something like a beef Wellington. It was a real treat to have this set up this way, and I've never had onigiri like this. Once I wrapped it with a bit of my seaweed, these were ready to go. I repeated the process until I used up all of that rice and that mushroom mixture, which gave me about 8 onigiri. The next one was to make this beautiful tuna onigiri. I absolutely love this one, and tuna mayo onigiri is probably one of my favorite things. I'm placing in a bit of rice at the bottom, followed by stuffing it with a bunch of that tuna and then more rice on top using my handy dandy press, and then finally making about 10 of these onigiris. Yes, I did eat one. We don't have to talk about that one. Lastly is setting up this cake. This cake has sat for a day wrapped with that honey mixture. It's a little bit dense, which will happen using bread flour, but it's still really moist from absorbing all of that honey. I'm cutting this in half, then cutting it in half again, then cutting those halves in halves, which gives me 8 equal pieces of this really beautiful looking cake. This guy is going to get plated up on a little bamboo tray, and this is ready to go as well. The last thing I really wanted to do was fill this entire thermos up with miso soup because it was really cold in that knife factory. With everything now ready, we have to drive back to Steelport Knives and surprise them with all of this after they give us a tour of their entire process. So we made our way back into Portland over to Steelport Knives, and when we arrived at the shop, we were greeted with the most amazing thing. The guard dog. Look at how adorable she is, but also we were greeted with this. So we're here at Steelport Knives in Portland. This is Eitan. He's gonna walk me through their entire process of how they make their custom knives right here. So, Eitan, take it away. However you guys want to. I'm excited to see everything that you guys do.
Right on, thanks. Yeah, we're excited about it too.
The first thing Eitan wanted to show me were the distinct stages at which the knife process happens. There are over 130 different steps to go from this to this, but we're going to get the condensed version.
All our raw materials, everything that we can get from Portland, we get from Portland or from the Pacific Northwest. We don't produce any steel, any raw steel in Oregon, so our steel comes from the Midwest.
They take this super dense rod of carbon steel and hit it with a massive hydraulic hammer to get this initial knife shape. Then, using a proprietary method, they perform a heat treatment on the blade and cool it very quickly in oil, then dipping it into liquid nitrogen, which sits at negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit. This gets the metal to a 65 Rockwell hardness. This makes the blade harder than most Japanese knives, which are known for their hardness.
If you get that right, then all your grains that grew during the heating process, they all shrink down.
Yeah.
And then shrink down even more with the cryo treatment.
And that's what really makes the harder blade, right?
Yeah.
Now, the harder the blade, the sharper it can get, but it also means it can be very brittle. The choice of steel used for these knives allows it to be incredibly sharp and maintain its strength. It's like when Gohan went Super Saiyan 2 and increased his strength without losing speed. After the initial shaping process of the knives are taken through a rigorous and meticulous process that involves polishing, shaping, and sharpening by hand.
Every part of the blade is going to be round and soft and polished, right? So
which gives it a very different hand feel or knife feel.
Yeah, which is much more pleasant to use, especially if you're using it all day. You're not going to develop those calluses that we talked about.
Not only is the blade rounded and softened, but so is the handle. The handle is made of local Oregon briarwood, a highly sustainable wood that gives a distinct handle for each knife. The wood used for the handle has to be kiln dried for months at a time until it is completely dry.
That is an 80 gram
so this is just
piece of wood.
Okay, just the kiln dried.
Yep.
Okay.
And then that's a stabilized one. You can tell it's almost twice the weight.
Yeah. At least, and it feels smoother too. Like it almost feels like there's no roughness, no imperfections, probably from the resin going in.
It polishes easier, it looks better.
Yeah,
it's
just darker.
Yeah,
right?
And it is, so it is still wood. You have to treat it like wood, but you're gonna have, you're not gonna have the same issues.
To get this really dense piece of wood, they have to use a vacuum chamber. The vacuum chamber pulls out any additional air from the wood and replaces that air with the resin. After this, the handles are baked to harden the resin to make a solid piece of wood for the handle.
Then we machine the wood to just rough shape.
Okay. But before they finish the handle, they do have a few more steps that they like to do.
So we'll take, different shades of wood, mix it in with this marine grade epoxy, and then we'll seal everything, and then we'll resand it.
Gotcha.
And sometimes we have to do this process several times until we get to the final shape.
So it's almost like making your own wood glue.
Yeah.
What's really cool is that each wooden handle is very unique and distinct from each other handle. The handles are then hand polished before having a special oil applied to really make the wood take on a new life of its own. I mean, look at this.
It brings out just the raw beauty of what you're using. We can't take credit for this. This is
such a difference.
Yeah, this is nature. This is not us.
Yeah.
Right? But then it gets nice and shiny, and then it gets nice and shiny, and you just maximize whatever material that you're working with, just like what we talked about with food, right? If you want to, you pick the good ingredients, but you have to treat them right.
Yep. Once that oil is applied to the handle, it actually has to dry for an additional day, and after that, we can remove this paper cover and sharpen the blades by hand.
The main thing is I can go and I can,
shave hair. That's good?
Yeah.
That's how you want it.
I think I spent more time talking than sharpening.
But after shaving a bit of arm hair, one thing that Eitan really wanted to show me was their patina process. This process actually protects the blade, and they use a local coffee. I've never seen coffee use to patina a blade before, and you get this beautiful finish because of it. Putting a patina on the blade before you get it actually shows if there's any imperfections in the knife. In most cases, you won't find a patina on a blade, and you'll just end up getting one naturally while using it.
You can see the difference in the heat treatment, which you don't see once it's polished.
Yep.
And you can also see the way the steel grain flows through the blade from the forging process.
Yeah.
And that's another reason that we patina, is because we can see the line here. We don't know if we got it right until we patina at the end.
And so you go through all of that, and then finally dip it in the coffee. And
and it's painful. Once in a while, something goes wrong. But we weed it out.
Spending a day with people who are so passionate about what we do really makes me appreciate everything that we do here. From gushing about our favorite animes to really just making a good plate of food for someone to eat, I really think there's something that all of us can appreciate about whatever it is we might enjoy. It helps spark conversation that otherwise wouldn't have happened. They asked me where I got the ideas for the food, and I said Demon Slayer, and we dove into that universe just for a little bit. Remember, inspiration can hit you from anything. I tried to overstuff the onigiri with as much tuna as possible.
This one first so it won't show up in the shots.
So I just want to encourage every single one of you guys out there. Exchange passions with someone, whether or not it's something that you've drawn, something that you've made, something that you've eaten, and just get out there and try something new. And remember, keep playing with your food.